Hi again, guys. Nick here with Creation Army TV. Today we'll be discussing scatterbrushes. This is part 2 in a series of videos. If you haven't watched part 1, you can watch it here. Otherwise, let's talk about some of the uses for scatterbrushes. Scatterbrushes are perfect for when you want to draw artwork made of particles. And a perfect example is clouds or fields of grass or photographic bokeh or star fields. Things where pieces of artwork that require many repetitions of the same artwork over and over, where you want variation in size and rotation and spacing, things like that. A perfect example is clouds. I like to draw clouds in my artwork that are made of scatterbrushes so that I can really just draw one blob shape and the spine of the path gets populated with my particles, which I put in my, in my scatterbrush palette. I'll show you one example here, and I do this a lot at my current job, where I have to draw a lot of youthful illustrations, and there come a lot of times when I need to quickly generate a cloud. So to do that, I'll just draw a simple black circle, pure black, so that I can tint it later if I need to, and I'll put it in my scatterbrush palette, give it a name, and then let's take a look at some of the values here. Of course, I've got my sizing, and everything is basically random, except for rotation, of course, because you won't be able to see rotation on a perfect circle. But everything here is pretty random. I like to leave my second size slider at 100%, and everything else basically would be smaller by sliding this slider to the left. You can adjust these however you want, but I get the best results with some of these settings. My spacing is really tight. You can see that these circles are basically overlapping each other, and my scatter just kind of bumps out and inward a little bit. And I've set my coloring mode, or my colorization mode, to tints so that I can color this cloud however I want to. If I decide later on that I want to make an orange cloud, I can do so this way by changing the fill and the stroke, which is the scatterbrush, to orange. And I'll undo that a couple of times. And also notice in my appearance palette that cloud circle 1, the actual name of the scatterbrush, appears here in the appearance palette. And I also have a white fill. If I didn't have that white fill, like if this was larger, you'd actually be able to see through it. This is where the scatterbrush doesn't actually come in far enough to cover the inside of the shape. So sometimes I'll just give it a white fill so that the inside is definitely covered. Here's another example. This is the same size circle, but as I zoom in, you can see that it's a blend. And if you haven't seen my series on blends, you can check those out now. I go into some pretty extensive detail about how blends work and how you can use them. So this circle blend, which is a blend of 20 in-between steps, is basically a gradated circle, because remember, we can't put gradients into the brush palette in any form. It always has to be broken apart into a blend. So if I use this sort of shaded blend as a scatterbrush particle, then you can make storm clouds, or you can make clouds where the actual body of the particles are shaded. So it's as if there's a light source now coming from the top left. And let's look at our appearance palette. I've got cloud circle 2 here, and a white fill, which is actually hidden. But after that, I've got a Gaussian blur on the entire shape. To basically to blur the details. If you unclick this effect, now we can see all of the particles sort of living here on this shape and overlapping each other. You give a little bit of a blur, and all of a sudden you got a nice thundercloud. Now this needs a lot of work, and you can manipulate. That's the beauty of scatterbrushes. You can manipulate their size and randomosity all day long and come up with something that'll look even better than this. But this is something that I made in something like a minute or two, and I can draw nice cartoony puffy thunderclouds with very little effort. Here's another variation. It's sort of the same thing, except the inner circle of the blend is pure white, and it's a little bit larger than the last time around. And so what this particle is going to do is it's going to give me a much larger highlight on this side in the cloud that I'll make, and I'll get my tint of color basically as a small crescent on the side. So I'll show you this cloud, and there we go. Now we have three types of cartoony clouds that are basically all made from scatter brushes, and they all are made very quickly. This one, if you look in the appearance palette, this is actually two objects that are identical, and one of them is made from the scatter brush that I pointed out just now, and it's got roughen on it as well as Gaussian blur. I'll take off the blur and you'll be able to see it. So if you put roughen on as an effect, first of all, the thing to notice is when you put that effect on, it will be above your stroke and fill in the appearance palette, and it will basically, you won't see any effect. That's because roughen is roughening the shape of the spine, not the particles. But if you move roughen below your stroke and fill, then it will actually roughen your particles randomly and give you this nice effect. Of course, you can always click this and manage how big you want the roughen amount to be and how much detail you want per, and look, now we have something that looks a little bit more like, dandelions or cotton balls. I'll cancel out of that. And I just want a little bit of roughen, and then of course I like to blur it a little bit after that. And this this cloud is exactly the same as this other one. I'll line them up again, except this cloud's opacity mode is set to hard light. So it gets us this sort of cartoony, we have very bright highlights, and it gets us this cartoony look where we have little shadows on the sides of the puffs of cloud. Another example that I mentioned in my previous video was grass. You can make grass pretty easily. If you're making short-cut grass that's maybe 2 or 3 inches tall, you can just make 1 or 2 grass blades. I like to make one facing and bending this way and one basically facing the other way with a tiny bit of variation in weight, and drop those in as scatter brushes, and then you can pretty quickly generate grass. Now this is a single stroke with 2 scatter brushes applied. What I mean by that, if you look again at the appearance palette, I have grass blade here and I have grass blade here. I have 2 strokes on this line, and they're both assigned a green color, and they are just distributed randomly along this line. Now this same exact line is duplicated down here, and then it's duplicated again up here, but the particles are made to be a little bit smaller. And then I blend one scatter brush to another, and again, in less than a minute, I have a field of grass, something that I could put in an illustration to make it look like lawn or grass or a grassy hill. And I can, of course, take the entire blend, and maybe I can arc it a little bit, or arch it, or do whatever I want. And pretty quickly I've got a curved hill. Maybe I could put a tree back here and some butterflies or something, whatever the client wants. So it's a good quick way to generate lots and lots of objects. So the last thing I'll talk about is something that I mentioned in my last video, and that's bokeh. Bokeh is a phenomenon that happens inside of a camera when a spot of light, like a candle or a faraway light bulb, is out of focus. And the shape of the irises within the camera lens give you this sort of bright blob in a photo. And it's become, in the past maybe 5 years, it's become very popular to put the bokeh look into a lot of things, especially when you look on Shutterstock or iStock for Christmas designs. Christmas and wintry designs in particular contain a lot of these sort of bokeh effects, and this is something that I generated in a short amount of time using scatterbrush combined with some other effects like gradient meshes, which I'll get into in future videos. So thanks for watching. open up Illustrator and experiment with scatter brushes and see what you can come up with. Well, that's all I have right now for scatter brushes. There's infinitely more uses for this, and I want you to go out and open up Illustrator and see what you can do with it. Experiment with it, push the boundaries. I'm Nick with Creation Army TV. Thanks for watching.